Glad you're feeling better, MC.
Good morning.
So
Good morning.
oh, never mind. Whoever's screen sharing, I'm seeing like on the left side of my screen, there it goes, it's gone again. It looks like it's a comment screen, just to let you know. So we're not broadcasting that publicly because I'm assuming it's your private messages.
Which aren't private because it's a government computer. But
Yeah,
good
exactly.
point.
But still, we don't want to broadcast live, I'm guessing.
Right.
Hi team, I'm screen sharing today because Kathleen is out. So I can circulate the live stream links. I'm gonna stop screen sharing for just a moment so I don't share my Facebook and Twitter to everyone watching. And then I'll throw it right back up in just a second.
I've been in many awkward meetings where someone accidentally like shares their direct messages like during a screen share and like comments are being said that are not intended for everyone to see. So.
Okay, the links have been shared and Steve, you're set to begin at 9 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. As chair of the commission, I call this meeting to order of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. This Zoom commission meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. For anyone in the public watching who would prefer to watch via a different platform than they are currently using, please visit our social media at redistrictingmi to find the link for viewing on other platforms. Our live stream today includes closed captioning. We have ASL interpretation available for this meeting. If you would like easier viewing options for the ASL interpreter on your screen, please email us at redistricting@mich.gov and we will provide you with additional viewing options. Similarly, if you would like access to translation services during the meeting, Please email us at redistricting@michigan.gov for details on how to access language translation services available for this meeting. Translation services are available for both Spanish and Arabic. Please email us and we will provide you with a unique link and call-in information. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at redistrictingmich.org for viewing at a later date. This meeting is also being transcribed, and those transcriptions will be made available and posted on redistrictingmichigan.org along with written public comment submissions. Members of the media who may have questions before, during, or after the meeting should direct those questions to Communications and Outreach Director Edward Woods III at woodse3@michigan.gov. For purposes of the public record and for members of the public watching, I will now ask the Department of State staff to take note of the members of the commission present. Sally.
Good morning, everyone. Commissioners, when I call your name, if you could please unmute yourself and say present and the city or county you are attending remotely from, that would be great. Doug Clark.
Present. I'm attending remotely from Rochester Hills, Michigan.
Juanita Curry.
Present, and I'm attending remotely from Detroit, Michigan.
Anthony Eade.
Present. Today I'm attending remotely from Detroit, Michigan.
Brittany Kellum. Rhonda Lang.
Present, attending remotely from Reed City.
Steve Lett.
Present, and I'm attending from Lee County, Florida.
Cynthia Orton.
Present, attending remotely from Battle Creek, Michigan.
MC Rothhorn.
Present, attending remotely from Lansing, Michigan.
Rebecca Zatella.
Present, attending remotely from Wayne County, Michigan.
Janice Follett.
Present, attending remotely from Highland, Michigan.
Erin Wagner.
Present, attending remotely from Charlotte, Michigan.
Richard Weiss.
Present and attending remotely from Saginaw, Michigan.
Dustin Witches.
Present, and I'm attending remotely from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
There is a quorum present.
Thank you. We have 12 of the 13 commissioners present, and as Sally indicated, that is a quorum. At this time, we would have public comment, but I am informed that that no one has signed up for public comment. But for those of you who may not have joined us previously, I have a few comments on how we conduct our public comment portion of these virtual meetings. Because this is a virtual meeting, members of the public have to sign in advance in order to address the commission. If you do sign up, you will have 2 minutes to speak to us. Public comment sign-up links are posted on Redistricting Michigan social media pages on Facebook and Twitter at redistrictingmi. And you can email our office at redistricting@michigan.gov. If you would like to submit your thoughts or comments to the commission, you may do that by email to redistricting@michigan.gov, and they will be provided to the commission. We will now move on to the agenda, which everybody should have received. Are there any additions that we would like to add to the agenda at this time? Sue.
I don't have additions, but I would like to, I do want to mention the most recent update to the agenda that was sent last night, added a third person to the California Commission panel. And then we also want to remove in 13C, the good marketing proposal.
So 13C will not be addressed today.
Parts of C will be, however, the good marketing proposal we want removed.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add or delete or change? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So motioned.
Second.
That's Anthony, and I saw Erin raise her hand as a second. All in favor, say, raise your hand. It is approved. Okay, next is review of the previous minutes from February 11, 2021. Are there any first off, are there any corrections? Okay, the only thing I saw reading through them was on the 5th page under number 4. A couple of typos, revised communications needs a Y, make it policy, and right below that, procurement review needs to spell out policy. Other than that, if we have no corrections, I would entertain a motion to approve the meetings as presented, minutes as presented. MC, motion, Doug, second. All in favor, raise your hand. They are approved. Any correspondence, Sue, that we need to discuss today?
There is no correspondence today.
So the public knows we did receive one correspondence that I will make some comment on so that people know that we really do read them. And this one had to do with communities of interest and this individual's thoughts on how to do mapping. We are clearly under the constitutional amendment as to the things that we have to consider, and as such, we will in fact consider those when we are doing our mapping, as well as the Voting Rights Act. Executive Director report, Sue.
Okay, good morning again, commissioners, and thank you for your continuing work to do fair, nonpartisan redistricting. Provided for your discussion today are 3 resolutions. One is for adopting the FOIA guidelines and procedures, which is Freedom of Information Act, adopting a communication plan, and also adopting the procurement review procedures and guidelines. We're moving along with our process for selecting consultants. The internal staff committee met yesterday, and I will get the rankings and rationale report and those proposals to the mapping committee by tomorrow. So you'll have plenty of time to review them for your meeting, which is next Tuesday afternoon from 1 to 3 on February 23rd. The plan is for the committee to bring their recommendations for bidder presentations back to this group on next Thursday, and then have those presentations the following Thursday, which would be March 4th. Yesterday afternoon was the deadline to receive bids for VRA legal counsel. However, we didn't receive any bids. So our internal staff committee is meeting this afternoon. And we're going to look at ways to move forward with seeking VRA counsel. So we will get back with the commission next week on some options for ways to seek consultants to fill this gap that we have. Also, I've provided today the Princeton budget memo. It gives you a sense of what they felt might be the costs for this commission. As we get our mapping proposal and other consultant proposals in, we can build out our budget more effectively, knowing those numbers. So those are just for your review. We won't have any discussion today on that. And lastly, our icebreaker for today is what 3 words best describe you? And do I have a volunteer to start today, or Commissioner Dustin, can you start us?
Sure. So 3 words that describe me would be I'm thinking outgoing, loyal, and patient.
Okay, all good qualities. Thank you. Richard, how about you?
That's a tough one. I guess it's all on who you talk to if you're asking somebody else. I guess I'm not really sure. Give me a few minutes to think about this one.
Okay, Doug, are you ready?
Yeah, I am. This was a tough one to come up with, but I thought that the number one would be very analytical in the things that I do. I'm very dependable and very motivated in getting things done when they're assigned to me. So I would say those are the 3 qualities.
Thank you. We've seen those. Cynthia, how about you?
Find my mouse. I'm gonna say kind and organized, and then I'm gonna steal Dustin's and say loyal. That's a good one.
Okay, thank you very much. Good qualities. Erin, what would you say?
Funny, I asked my kids this and they said mother of 6.
That's 3 words.
It is 3 words. That's what they came with. I came up with detailed oriented, diligent, and friendly.
Thank you. Those are good qualities. How about you, Anita?
Oh, thought about that when you said that. I think one of them would be creative. Another would be to enjoy learning. And another one would be friendly.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Nice qualities. Steve, how about you?
I would say calm, persistent, and kind of a phrase, able to look at both sides of a question.
Okay, good qualities again. Janice, how about you?
Tenacious, perceptive, and emphatic.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Nice qualities. How about you, Anthony?
Well, thank you for the question. I think these go a long way in helping the public know us and help us to get to know each other since we're having to meet over Zoom. For me, I'd say I'm a leader, I'm confident, and I'm empathetic.
Okay, excellent qualities. Thank you. How about you, MC?
I'll go with curious, grateful, and in process.
Aren't we all? Thank you. Rhonda.
Hard one. I could probably come up with 100, but first I'd say honest, empathetic, and then a fighter in the sense that no matter what life throws at me, I never quit. So that's it.
Okay, those are good qualities. How about you, Rebecca?
Sorry, taking myself off mute. I would say tenacious, cheerful, and I would also say independent.
Okay, Richard, I'm back at you. Thank you, Rebecca. Good qualities.
Well, I guess I'd probably consider hardworking. If I say I'm going to be there, I'll be there. Try to think a problem through before I do anything with it. I guess that's about it. I haven't given that much thought.
Okay, well, those are good qualities, and it's really interesting to see how the commissioners' qualities all strengthen each other because we are all different in many ways. And let's talk to staff too. Julianne.
Good morning, commissioners. I know in my interview I highlighted technical skills, communication skills, and hard work. But for my personal qualities, I would highlight inquisitive, adventurous, and positive.
Okay, and how about you, Edward? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, commissioners. How are you?
Morning.
Beautiful smiles. Thank you. The three things that came to mind was driven, collaborative, and engaging.
Thank you, Edward. Those are qualities that I might say about myself. I guess we're pretty compatible here, aren't we? But I'm thinking enthusiasm, integrity, and kind. You know, I hope to always be kind to people in everything I do. So I want that to be the way that I work with others. So thank you very much, everybody, for sharing your qualities today. And remember, my virtual door is always open. Call me, text me, email me anytime that you have a question or I can be of service. Thank you.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Sue? Not seeing any hands flagging me down. We'll move on to Julianne's report. Julianne.
Thank you very much. Today, I'm excited to continue the discussion on FOIA, procurement, and the communications policies. We'll start, but likely not finish, the overview of the Constitution, which will include the subsection 13 criteria. The next three items that the Commission can expect to see from me will be the memo on the census issues. This will address timing of the data release, its impact on the Commission, and the options moving forward. It will most likely be a privileged and confidential memorandum so we can have a closed session and discuss legal strategies. The second item would be a records retention policy that I've mentioned in the past. And the third item would be the conflicts of interest policy. And just for a couple examples, commissioners would be in a conflict of interest under the following circumstances. If they, members of their family, partners, or close associates could personally or professionally benefit, directly or indirectly, financially or otherwise, from their position on the Commission, whether they use their position on the Commission to the disadvantage of detriment to a third party, soliciting or obtaining preferential treatment, and if circumstances arise to compromise, appear to compromise the ability to make unbiased decisions. Now, all of these items complement the code of conduct that you've already adopted. That will also include the policy that I'm speaking of, will also include the standards of conduct and disclosures, as well as the provisions to effectuate subsection 3E of the Constitution, which is the vacancy of office provisions. I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of what to expect in that policy, and I look forward to bringing it to you in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from any commissioner for Julianne? Okay. Communications and outreach. Edward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone, once again. I'm just excited. Next week, you know, we have our pictures and video being taken next week. So just want to remind you of your times. And if you have not had a chance to provide me with your script, to please do so no later than today. But I'm looking forward to building up our website and getting people a chance to get to know you. There's already been requests to actually Detroit Free Press wants to put up a commission page to identify who you are and how to engage in the process. As a request that we received this week. So far from our outreach to county governments, townships, as well as cities, we've received more than 50 requests for presentations, and they are still coming in. So I will be getting with you later this week, beginning of next week, to see your availability to appear virtually for these meetings as well. We continue to meet with statewide organizations that have ideas with regards to our work and getting more people involved. So if you're a statewide organization and you're interested in helping us get the word out, increase awareness and engagement for redistricting, please give us send me an email at woodse3@michigan.gov. For any and all statewide organizations, we want to be inclusive as possible, have you on our mailing list so that you can share with your members or affiliate organizations the great work that is being done by this commission. Later today, we'll be talking about the policy communication policy, as Julianne mentioned earlier. We'll be talking about our potential public hearing locations and sites, as well as dates. And then our statement of work as it relates to what we need to get done in our communications and outreach effort. Want to give a special thanks out to Sally and Sarah, Jake and Chad with the Department of State. I want to identify for the record and place in the record, Mr. Chair, the great work that was done by the University of Michigan students. There were 6 students that participated in putting together the communities of interest for the University of Michigan, not for the commission, for the University of Michigan as a project, and just want to make sure that their names are entered in the record. Thank you so much for this opportunity. If there's any questions, I can take them at this time.
Does anybody have any questions for Edward? I have one. I saw a headline, I believe it was in the State Journal, about we're going to run out of money. Did you read that?
Yes.
Are we keeping track of articles that we see come out in publications? Are we having a clipping service or anything like that?
We will have critical mentions available, but right now I have a Excel spreadsheet, and I can share that with you after the meeting for those that are interested.
The other thing I think might be helpful for everybody, because if you don't take the State Journal or other publications, you necessarily aren't able to read what they're writing. They don't always show up on the internet. If you're doing something where we can have access to those articles, that would be nice.
I can work on that for you.
With those comments, anybody else have any questions? Okay. Secretary of State staff updates. Sally, are you still with us?
Commissioners, I'm still with you, but I don't think MDOS has any specific updates for today. But as always, reach out if you have any questions.
You're not going to talk about computers today?
Well, it's my understanding you all should have them. So, and Sue's nodding her head, so that means I'm right. So hopefully that you're able to get them set up within the next week or so. But, of course, we'd have to Sue or myself if you have issues with that.
Well, mine is being held at the Austin building, and I'm supposed to pick it up Monday meet with John, who's going to take care of me. So.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. And Michigan Department of State has nothing new. Okay. Unfinished business. FOIA procedures guidance resolution 2021-23. I assume Julianne is going to do that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So before you have draft 2 of the FOIA procedures that we went through in great detail the last meeting. The modifications to draft 2 was changing the street address to our PO box, updating the email address, which I actually will update again to micrc-foia@michigan.gov. And thank you to the MDOS team, particularly Nelson, for getting this set up so quickly and so efficiently. And the only other change in the document was on page 4 to reflect that the executive director will process the appeals. Other than that, there are no changes to the document that was before you. I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain additional revisions, but I received no revisions over the course of the week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, does anybody have any questions regarding the FOIA policy procedures and guidelines that we looked at last week, and a couple of minor corrections were made? Anybody have anything? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve, adopt, I guess, the procedures and guidelines as amended. Aaron, you're making the motion, or you got a question?
I was motioning, Steve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Cynthia, second. All in favor, say, raise your hand. Okay, it is adopted unanimously. All right. Key provisions of constitutional amendment and census timing general counsel. Where did you go? There you are. You're doing this, Julianne?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am. I believe that's a new business item
Oh, I'm sorry.
reflected on my agenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're back to communication policy resolution. That you also, Julianne, or Edward? He has himself unmuted. That gives me a clue. See how quick I am?
Very quick and adept. But I want to thank Sue and Julianne for the help, as well as Department of State. There's a P.O. box number, and this is getting back to Commissioner Lang to make sure that those who do not have internet access have a way to mail something in. And the P.O. box number is something that is dedicated solely to the commission work. So we placed that in there, knowing that that was better than the street mail address. So we wanted to share that with you. And that's why the whole number 2 under presentations is highlighted as a request. And then going under media releases, there was a great discussion last week with regards to what would be the best way to make sure there's some type of input from the commission before things go out. And so what we have written is the MICRC will designate an individual member of the commission for the Communications and Outreach Department to review and approve press releases. Individual members shall receive press releases prior to dissemination, and it just says what they were coordinated. So basically the policy will identify a member of the commission who will review and approve press releases at the discretion of the commission.
Okay,
And those are the only changes.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to look at those? And are there any questions for Edward? Doug?
Yeah, as part of this today, are we going to identify that individual, Edward?
I would hope so, yes.
Okay. When we do, I have a suggestion.
Any other questions? All right. Is identifying the individual need to be in here, or do we want to adopt this and then identify the individual?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would suggest doing those as separate resolutions. That way, if the individual needed to change, the policy would remain intact and you would just be voting on the identity of the individual.
I agree. We'll take a motion to adopt the communications policy as presented. Janice, I'll take you as the motioner and Doug as the second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, the same sign. It is adopted. Okay. Now, Doug.
Yes. I would like to recommend an individual, but I'd like to hear from that individual as well. As I recall, Juanita has a background in communications and public relations, and I think it may benefit us to use her knowledge and expertise in this area. But I'd like to get her input on that.
Juanita, they're calling for your expertise and comments on the communications policy.
You all excuse me for a minute. I had I don't know, something hit me for a moment. Well, first of all, I think Mr. Woods is doing a great job so far. I was wondering when it came to, I remember when, I think it was either Cynthia or one of the, I'm having a little strange feeling hitting me. But anyhow, I was wondering if it was possible if we could if we would be able to have a billboard put up in that area where, was it Cynthia or one of the women that said that that they were out in the rural, and so that they needed some information or someone to get some literature or something out there so they would know. So just a thought. Did you all understand?
That'd be something that we could consider and take a look at, and that would be something I think that Edward could investigate and come back with what that may look like at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Right now, that's it for right now. I'm having some kind of little funny feeling, so hope it's not the, I don't know if it's a hot flash.
I guess my question is the person, whoever this is going to be, what do we anticipate that they're going to be doing for the commission in addition to what, Edward, you're doing?
Mr. Chair, I think the concern was making sure that someone saw the press release before it went out to last week. If I did not capture that correctly, I'll defer to Commissioner Clark, but I just know that was the concern. You know, I would be drafting it, I would be putting it together, I would be ensuring the quotes, but it's just having someone fly spec it to make sure that the voice of the commission is adequately represented in the statement. And it also goes with regards to my contract to making sure I'm in compliance as well.
Okay, Juanita, is that something you would be willing to do?
Yes.
Okay, Rebecca, I saw your hand fly up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if he's looking for a single person, or is he looking for like a couple people? Like sort of, you know, you can contact these 3 people and have them fly spec it.
I was looking for a single person, you know, just in time, but if the commission feels there should be like a rank order just in case someone's not available, that might be a great suggestion, Commissioners, to tell us. So thank you for that insight.
Okay, Juanita is willing to do it, assuming we vote her in. Is there someone who would like to be? I think backup is a good idea. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to back up? Rebecca.
Yeah, I can be the backup.
Okay. 2 I would think would be sufficient, but if somebody else wants to get in line. Julianne, you've got you go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would be prepared to read the motion for you. I've jotted it out when the time is appropriate. I know the discussion is ongoing.
Well, I think we're, Doug?
Yeah, the only comment I wanted to make, I want to add on to what Edward was saying. One of the reasons we're taking this approach is to ensure we have some checks and balances.
Right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate that from last week. Okay, I'm all set.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we'll have Julianne read the motion. Go right ahead, Julianne.
Thank you. The motion would be presented February 18th of 2021. Resolved that the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission approves the designation of the following individual members under subpart 6 of the communications policy, being Juanita Curry and the alternate Rebecca Zatella, with no attachments to the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Entertain a motion. I would entertain a motion to adopt. Aaron, I see a hand as a motion. Doug, second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, the same sign. Motion is adopted. We have a reviewer and an alternate reviewer. Very good. Okay. Well, break is up, but we just got started, so we're gonna not do that. Unless somebody really wants to take a break. Rhonda.
I think at the moment, it might be a good idea to take a quick break so everybody can regroup, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not chaining anybody to their desk or their computer or anything else. We'll take 10 minutes, 9:46.
Thank you.
Be back. Oh, we're waiting for Julianne to come back. She's next on the hit parade. And speaking of our general counsel, she seems to have magically appeared. We're up to your procurement review procedures and guidelines.
Wonderful. Let me share my screen. And it's a very short slide deck, only 10 slides to run through the policy that we distributed. This is draft 2 of the policy dated February 12th. And the purpose would be to utilize taxpayer dollars with integrity and accountability while fostering transparency and uniformity in procurement. It would apply to the commission, members, staff, as well as any individual participating in the procurement process for the MICRC. There are 3 thresholds, 3 tiers. I'll say $4,999.99 and below. No bid would be required. That's an informal contract. $5,000 to $49,999.99 would be 3 informal bids are required. I inserted the word informal there for clarity and distinction between the formal solicitation process, which would be required for any procurements $50,000 and above. The 3 places I would like to insert the word informal is here in subpart C1, subpart C5B, and part E1, and I'll cover each of those as they come up on the slides. This procurement policy would allow for the MICRC to participate in existing state of Michigan contracts, and each would require a solicitation manager to be identified for the convenience of not only the public, but for the commissioners as well. It also would provide for emergency contracting powers that I would recommend putting in a maximum amount for that ability for immediate delivery of goods or services. Those would be reported to the MICRC at its next regular meeting for action to ratify within the following 2 weeks with appropriate documentation. The RFP process, this is for $50,000 and above threshold. It would, the process that you're currently going through for the VRA and the line drawing and mapping technical services. They would be posted for a minimum of 17 days, opportunity for bidder questions, the establishment of a committee of members of the commission to review. The committee will meet in open session and forward its recommendations to the full commission, who will by majority vote select the bidders and determine the final award. The second level, the middle tier, again, the 3 informal bids would be $5,000 to just under $50,000, which is reflected in subpart C4B of the policy. The commission would approve issuance of that request by majority vote. It would be posted for a minimum of 7 days. There may be bidder questions and responses available, but they're not mandated. It's discretionary. We would still conduct an internal staff review, and the MICRC would meet in open session to discuss, review, and by majority vote, approve the final award. The final tier would be contracts of just below $5,000. No bid or posting is required. That would be the executive director procuring the best value for the MICRC. The accountability provisions would be the cumulative limit for any one vendor cannot exceed the informal contracting threshold, and the executive director would prepare a monthly report to the commission identifying what was procured, the actual cost, and any other relevant information such as due diligence in that process. The evaluation guidelines are set out in subpart D, which is on page 3 of the policy. It requires disclosure of actual or potential conflicts of interest for anyone evaluating, reviewing the procurements, performing the duties impartially and without bias, upholding ethical standards, and reporting any contact during the procurement process from either bidders or third parties on behalf of the bidders to general counsel, so that I can send a letter or a phone call, most likely both. The respecting confidentiality of documents, until they are discussed in an open meeting, and evaluating each bid on the merits and applying the criteria consistently among those bids. Awards are final decisions. All contract and activities, they must be authorized by resolution. No award or decision is final until a resolution is adopted and the successful bidder is notified by the MICRC. Again, being a public body, all of your decisions are made collectively, not independently. So this is a critical distinction for not only the commissioners, but for the bidders that we'll be doing business with as well. The MICRC shall award procurements requiring that's above the $50,000 threshold and between the $5,000 and $50,000 threshold based on the most responsive proposal received from a responsible vendor that provides the best value. And I've inserted the definitions for those award criteria in subpart E1, which best value, how that is arrived at, examining the components of the proposal, including price, expertise, supply, timeliness, Michigan economic impact, in compliance with the relevant law. Responsive proposal is one that is submitted in accordance with the solicitation instructions and meets the mandatory requirements. And a responsible vendor is a vendor that demonstrates it has the ability to successfully perform the duties identified by the solicitation. And that would conclude my remarks summarizing the policy. As always, I'm available for questions, comments, or additional revisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Doug.
Yeah, Julianne, I have a couple questions. When you use the word solicitation manager, are you referring to a purchasing agent?
So Doug, that's an excellent question. What that would refer to is either a purchasing agent that is handling the RFP process for the larger contracts, or it would be someone internal, such as the executive director, that would be handling the middle threshold. So it could be either, and there would be some, there would be some flexibility there, Doug, but it would be clear who was handling that particular procurement or solicitation.
Okay. Another question is, there's a number of places throughout the document where you refer to 3 bids are required. Sometimes we don't get 3 responses back for the bids. So how do we handle that?
So that distinction, Doug, that was where I wanted to add the word informal to further distinguish it from that formal RFP process. So these would be the more informal bids. And I would propose, if we did not receive 3 bids from a 7-day posting on our website, that the MICRC, through its executive director, could engage in direct solicitation. Okay. Or have the ability to choose between the bids presented, if the commission would be comfortable with those selections. I could prepare that language.
Yeah, I sometimes I think 3 bids being required just won't handle our situation. So, and then my final question is on C4. You have a yellow mark with a dollar amount missing. Is there a recommendation on that dollar amount?
I would recommend in the area of 25,000, but again, that would just be a starting point for the discussion and by the commission and direction from the commission on what would be a comfortable number. Again, the informal contracting process is below $5,000. So I felt that $10,000 was very close to that amount. Again, it's the comfort level of the commission for this check and balance, and I would welcome that discussion and that guidance as to that number.
But the 25,000 you're talking to gets into our second tier, really. I mean, that's a considerable amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way I read this is we're saying the executive director can go on their own and authorize $25,000, if that was the amount. Is that true, Julia?
Yes, and again, it's just a proposal. So if the commission, again, if does not want emergency contracting provisions such as this, again, with 18-hour notice, we can convene a meeting of the full commission. So there are other options that exist. It's that this option in the event of emergency for emergency provisions. So I wouldn't imagine that it would need to be exercised that frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a dollar amount in mind, but I thought 25 was kind of high. So anyways, I think Rhonda had a question as well. I'm finished.
Rhonda.
Cynthia had her hand way up long before me, so I'd like her to go first.
Cynthia.
Well, I have a different question, but along these lines, what do we think an emergency procurement might entail?
Anybody?
That's an excellent question. So again, when we're talking about vendors or supplies or things that we can prepare for and plan for, those would definitely not be emergencies. So I think the example I'm most familiar with emergency provision of services is either to deal with something that arises that's unexpected. It would be if that there was an issue with one of the meeting spaces that something needed to be procured for the commission immediately, something like that. Or what I'm familiar with is emergency provision of legal services, where you don't have the luxury of time to be able to go through a fuller process if your answer is due in 21 days. So those types of things would be two examples off the top of my head. I hope that's helpful.
One of the things we also discussed, knowing that we're doing public hearings and traveling, and something was to take place where we need some additional, let's say a bus breaks down, or we have some technology issues that we need to address ASAP because of the requirement in our Constitution. Those would be some of the things that would happen if someone's not able to fulfill their obligation.
Cynthia.
So then what is the top limit of what something like that might cost, I think is where we should consider.
I think that the commission can discuss or again, we can put in a number that you would be comfortable with that would be above the $5,000 really would be the only parameter that I would recommend. Again, I put up the 25,000 as a discussion starting point. And certainly any number below that the commission is comfortable with that you decide on would be appropriate. And I would welcome that.
Rhonda.
Just one quick question. On the 3 different tiers, how did you come up with those numbers for the amount for each tier?
This is an excellent question, Rhonda. Those tiers match the state's level, so that way we could capture their formal procurement process for 50,000 and above.
Doug.
Yeah, Julia, going back to the dollar amount, does the state have an emergency procurement dollar amount?
And normally there is not a limit on emergency procurement dollar amounts, but I felt that might not be appropriate for that the commission might want to set a limit for that.
Okay.
But certainly you don't need a limit, again, because when you're dealing with emergency situations.
Yeah, you just don't know how much. Yeah. Right.
That for emergency provisions, generally there isn't a limit because you don't know what it's going to take to address that emergency. So generally best practice is to not set a limit, which is also appropriate if the commission.
Yeah.
If the commission.
I would almost recommend we take that route, not to set a limit, and because we don't really anticipate using this. it's an emergency situation, so that would be my recommendation. Is not to set a limit, change the verbiage, but that's up to the group.
Anybody else have a question? Yes, I have a question. Is there any reason why that it could not be the executive director and the emergency delivery couldn't be in conjunction with a commission member? And it's not like we don't have immediate communication with everybody. Just
So
like
I want to just get
we set a person for the press releases.
correct. And the distinction I would make is that an individual commissioner can't, unless you want to delegate that authority, but then those meetings would need to be open. So I think we really run into a situation there where, whereas the media releases, it's a more of a review, where here it would, if I understand you correctly, Steve, it's more of that they would be approving it. And really an individual commissioner, the way that the commission is set up, it can't bind the full commission. I do hear what you're saying though, about having another check and balance there. But I think that to formally designate somebody to do that would take that portion of the procurement authority away from the full commission.
Okay. Any other questions? Doug?
No, I just want to say, Steve, I thought that was a good thought to add that check and balance, but apparently from a Open Meetings Act situation and legally that we're probably better off not doing that. So, but I think it's a good thought. Because we do everything we do, we should have checks and balances, particularly financially. Is there a way around that, Julianne? An easy way
around the open meeting? No. No, if you're asking a way around, so if you were going to delegate that authority, even just specifically for emergency contracting activities, that individual would be acting on behalf of the commission. So that would be required to comply with the Open Meetings Act and all of those important transparency provisions. What we've got in the policy instead is that they would be reported, any emergency procurements would be reported to the commission at the very next meeting, the next regular meeting, and detailing the circumstances and the particulars of the procurement, the actual cost, the rationale, all of those things.
Would it benefit us then to, when we do make these emergency procurements, to always ensure there's a clause that the ICRC can negate the contract if they so choose?
So that would be difficult to get somebody to procure, to provide goods if there was the chance that could be done, because the goods, whatever we're procuring, whether it be goods or services under an emergency context, would need to be immediately provided. And I fear that if there was such a disclaimer in the contract language, that would really chill people's willingness to participate in that. Rather than the next regular meeting, we could change to immediate disclosure, if that would be more helpful to the commission.
I was just searching for ways to get checks and balances in there. That's all. So just to protect us, not the commission, but all of us. You know. So I mean, it may not be workable in this situation. So that's what I was searching for. That's the only comment I had.
Excuse me, Anthony.
So what kind, generally, when we're saying emergency procurement, what qualifies? You know, I'm having trouble foreseeing a circumstance where there would be an emergency where we have to spend more than, I don't know, $10,000. You know, if a bus breaks down or we need a new venue somewhere for whatever reason, or if, I don't know, if the place we book has a power outage and we need to pick a new place on the fly, you know, besides circumstances like that, I don't know what would qualify as an emergency.
I think you
Right,
I think you answered your own question. I mean, who knows? That's why you put emergency. You don't list things. If you list things, they're not emergencies. I'm not being facetious. I mean, it's something that you don't know. And the suggestion here is to have the ability for the executive director to have someone that's there to make that decision, as you say, on the fly.
Right, I understand that, but I think the point of contention that we're having so far is the dollar limit we're setting on this. Whether we want it to be the $25,000 that our general counsel originally had as a starting point, or as Doug said more recently, make it unlimited. So I think to help determine that number, is there any like you said, you know, it's an emergency, so we don't know, but like generally speaking with the state where it is unlimited, how often is this used?
So, and I definitely agree with Steve's comments, as well as the observations that you've made, Anthony. So generally, governmental units or public bodies, or we reserve these rights to deal with threats to public health, welfare, or safety. So the commission's operations, we would want the emergency provisions to be able to deal with any obstacles that arise to you being able to do your work. That would be, again, not in the general course of business. So these would be unanticipated, unexpected, and due to the timing of them would require immediate, that they immediately be addressed. And much like everything else coming before the commission, it really is on a case-by-case basis, whether we knew or how it needs to be addressed. And that is another reason that generally emergency contracting provisions don't have dollar limits, because you don't know what that emergency need is going to be. So that way it gives you the most flexibility. I hope that was responsive.
Cynthia, you had your hand up.
Well, one thing I want to say is I think our biggest obstacle right now to us being able to do our work is probably our limited budget. So I think that's part of the problem that we're having with setting a blank check as an emergency. I don't feel comfortable with that, but I don't know what the answer is. I'm wondering if maybe Edward and Julianne and Sue could come up with some emergency scenarios or things that they think we might run into, and then put a dollar amount to that so that we could have some idea of what we might be talking about.
Any other comments? Any response, Julianne, Edward, or Sue?
So we've been discussing, and that's how we arrived at the recommendation to start the conversation with 25,000. Again, balancing how these things are normally done, but respecting the unique circumstances of the commission. Certainly, if you wanted some scenarios, it would be very hard to attach a dollar amount with any precision, but certainly some estimations could be, if that information would be useful, we would be happy to prepare that.
Well, would a proposal be to table this until the next meeting? Allow the executives of our commission to come up with something and bring it back. Anthony.
If we do that, how about, so we don't use up a whole bunch of our time at our next meeting discussing this again. It would be nice if we had, a couple proposals, one with like an unlimited amount, like how Doug and our general counsel was saying, and then another one with that dollar amount, and then we can just decide then and there.
You're making that as a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second? Dustin has seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, raise your hand. All opposed, the same sign. Okay, the motion is to bring this back next week with a couple of scenarios, dollar amount and what the emergency would be, and or no dollar amount. And we'll vote on it. Okay. Constitutional amendment and census timing. Julianne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me share my screen here. And again, as I indicated earlier, it's unlikely that we will be able to get through the whole presentation today, but we shall begin it. And I know Sue will keep me honest on my time. Okay, what I would like to do today is to go through just an overview of some of the key constitutional provisions in Article 4, Section 6 of the Constitution, which created the MICRC. So how did we get here? On the left, we have the infamous now 1812 drawing of the state Senate districts outside of Boston. The governor that signed the bill into law was Elbridge Gerry, spelled with a G, so resembles a salamander, so we have gerrymandering, which has historical negative connotations about a corruption of the democratic process relative to drawing districts. On the right, we have the portion of the Michigan congressional districts that were part of a challenge on a 2017 lawsuit brought by the League of Women Voters against Secretary Benson, and we'll touch on that later in the presentation. It's not an isolated issue. I had many examples that I could have chosen from to show you on the slide. What I selected on the left is the Texas 35th Congressional District. This district was upheld in 2018 by the US Supreme Court. The lower federal court held that it was a constituted racial gerrymandering against Latino and African-American voters. The US Supreme Court reversed, and it held that only one district, and it was a House district, was violated the Voting Rights Act. So the one on the left was upheld by the Supreme Court. The map on the right from Pennsylvania's 7th Congressional District did not go to the US Supreme Court, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court held that that map constituted that it was illegal and unconstitutional. After the legislature failed to submit an updated plan, the court imposed this particular district. Let's see. So background on redistricting: nationwide every 10 years following the census, so that the political offices can reflect the population of the state. In November 2018, in Michigan, we had the passage of the Proposal 18-2, changing the Michigan Constitution to make citizens responsible for drawing the lines. This was a significant shift, the control from redistricting from the state legislature to this commission, and it also established strong public participation and transparency during the redistricting process. The goals for the slide deck today is to cover the following select provisions. Subsection 7 is key dates. I've removed subsection 8 from my slide deck because it's something that Edward will be addressing later in this meeting. Subsection 9 dealing with the additional public hearing dates after a plan, proposed plans have been identified, and then again going into the subsection 13 criteria. The key dates in subsection 11, the first was already met when this inaugural commission was seated and took the oath of office on September 17th. The next commission must be convened on or before October 15th of 2030. Additional dates in subsection 7. On or before November 21st is the constitutional deadline. We'll definitely be discussing that more later. The commission shall adopt redistricting plans for state Senate districts, state House of Representative districts, as well as congressional districts, which there are currently 14. Michigan is expected to lose at least one seat this redistricting cycle. It's important to note that in 2020, after the 2020 census, we lost a seat, and that was the 4th decade in a row that Michigan had lost a seat. So if we lose another seat this cycle, it will be a trend over the last half century. Going on to the census data. So the population counts are required to be given to the president. The original deadline from the Bureau was designated to meet is December 30th. The updated deadline is on or before April 20th. The redistricting counts used to redraw state legislative districts, not congressional. That original deadline was on or before March 31st. And to put it in context, the previous legislative redistricting commission in Michigan had that data on March 11th of 2011. So last week, the US Census Bureau announced a new timeline for redistricting count data to go to the states on or before September 30th. This creates critical timing issues, and we've already started to discuss this, and we will definitely continue to discuss it. Under subsection 14, there needs to be at least 45 days of public comment prior to the vote to adopt a final plan before the November 1st deadline. That date, as we've indicated in the past, is Friday, September 17th of 2021. We now expect our census data by September 30th, 2021. So this is an untenable situation and a tension there. So I want to say again at this point, I know I mentioned it last meeting, and I'll mention it again today, that there are options to address the delay that I will present to the commission for discussion and make a recommendation, and we can have that discussion in the near future. I will bring those options before you in a privileged and confidential document where we will most likely have our first closed session to explore those options. Now, given recognizing and respecting those critical timing issues, I did want to highlight again that it's critically important that we continue the work. There are other constitutionally mandated triggers, again, the informational public hearings that Edward will detail in his presentation later when he presents those proposed dates and locations to you, but that the work, we must continue the work while we're addressing the issues that were definitely brought to the forefront last week. Subsection 9 deals with proposed plans and public hearings. 5 are required, at least 5 public hearings after the commission adopts proposed plans, at least 1 for each district. Those plans must be published in advance of the public hearing. And there was a notation in the Constitution that each commissioner may only propose 1 plan for each type of district, being congressional, state house, and state senate. That brings us to subsection 13, criteria. Did anyone have any questions at this point before we start a new section? If not, I will continue. The subsection.
I have one quick question. This is Commissioner Zatella. So what is the difference between the 2 types of data that we're getting? The one from April 30th, is that just like general counts? And then the data we're expecting in September is, I'm guessing, more granular, like, broken down by ethnicity and whatnot. Is that the difference?
That's some of the differences, yes. So the data that goes specifically to the executive branch is to apportion the 435 congressional seats. So we need that data in order to do that. The redistricting data that we're now expecting at the end of September under the most recently announced deadline would be that more granular. And that data must be overlaid with our state election data as well to be useful to the commission. So hopefully that helped distinguish those 2 data sets even further for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions that I can respond to at this point before we get into the criteria? Okay. Anthony? Oh,
That data that is now not due until the end of September, that would include the data down to the voter block level, correct?
to the census block. The voter data would be
Yeah.
something that the state of Michigan would hold, not the federal government. Okay, let me go back here, pardon me. And we were, apparently if we go. Okay, there we are. So the subsection 13 criteria, the commission is required to follow it per the Constitution. The 7 criteria are listed in the order of priority. In the Constitution, they're annotated by letters. We'll use numbers for the purposes of the PowerPoint, just for ease of reference. And I did want to note that it will be a challenge to reconcile the conflicts and tensions that exist between the criteria during the mapping process. So the commission is lucky to have them in a ranked order. Some states do not enjoy that level of specificity or focus. So going into the criteria, the first criteria deals with equal population, the Voting Rights Act, and federal laws. It was a series of Supreme Court cases in the 1960s, starting with Baker v. Carr in 1962. Prior to that, the courts had stayed away from these, what they considered political questions, and they entered the field. During those cases in the 1960s, equal population rose as the most fundamental requirement, and the court in those decisions set standards for congressional and legislative redistricting. So we'll start with the congressional standard set forth in Westbury versus Sanders in 1964. This was a case in Georgia where one congressional district had 3 times the population of another congressional district. So they alleged that this denied them the full benefit of the right to vote. The lower court, while acknowledging that it was an issue, concluded it was a political question and declined to offer any resolution. The US Supreme Court reversed and instituted the strict standard of population equality for congressional standards, again, for those 435 districts that we were just talking about a few moments ago. This standard is based on Article 1, Section 2 of the US Constitution. As to legislative standards for equal population, this is the Reynolds v. Sims case, also in 1964. In this case, it comes from Alabama. Both houses in Alabama had not been reapportioned since 1903. The result was, after the 1960 census data, the largest Senate district had approximately 41 times the population of the smallest Senate district, and the largest House district had approximately 16 times the population of the smallest district. So that led the US Supreme Court to identify the substantial equality standard, and they based those holdings on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Deviations, only in the legislative standard of substantial equality. This case in 1973 was a Connecticut voter challenge that the deviations were larger than required by the Equal Protection Clause, and it also split too many town boundaries. The Supreme Court held that the redistricting board was not required to justify deviations of this percentage. So Justice Brennan, in his dissent, did an amazing survey of legislative plans that the court had dealt with over the years and alleged that it established a 10% threshold where total deviations 10% or less are presumptively constitutional, but subsequent case law demonstrated that the 10% is not a safe harbor. There is a rebuttable presumption by providing other evidence that even if the deviation is less than 10%, it still could have been held on illegitimate factors that predominated the redistricting process. So over the next course of cases, the court majority endorsed the rule and followed the rule that Justice Brennan's dissent accused them of following. So recent cases on equal population, there's a Texas case from 2016 where the challenge was that total population included non-voting residents such as illegal immigrants, children, and prisoners, and that imbalanced the voting. It diluted the vote of registered voters in certain districts based on those population inequalities. The Supreme Court in that case, they indicated that total population is a permissible metric to arrive at the one person, one vote standard. And indeed, historically, that has been what is used. The Harris case from 2016, the Supreme Court, this was a challenge against the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission maps that there was a 14th Amendment equal protection challenge that the maps, the districts were insufficiently equal. And the court held that the plaintiffs failed to show that it was more probable than not that the deviation was based on illegitimate redistricting factors. So the Arizona maps were upheld as well. They found that it was a good faith effort to comply with the Voting Rights Act, even though partisanship played some role. The intent was not there. Let's see. Moving on to the Voting Rights Act that prohibits any states or political subdivisions imposing any voter qualifications, standards, practice, or procedures that abridge a citizen's right to vote based on race, color, or member in a minority language group. Section 2 mandates that district lines cannot be drawn to dilute minority voting power. There's political subdivisions can comply with subsection 2 by creating majority-minority districts where a minority group would compose a majority of that district's total population. The two things to be concerned about with minority districts is cracking, where you dilute the voting power of a minority or the opposing party's supporters across many districts. You crack them up, or you pack them all into one district, which also dilutes their voting power. And I wanted to note that to comply with the 14th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act, race must be considered so that minorities' votes are not diluted. But the court has been very clear throughout their cases that race cannot be the predominant factor. And Sue has just given me my 3-minute warning, which I very much appreciate. The Voting Rights Act, I think we'll be able to finish the Voting Rights Act. I will endeavor to do that. Section 2 is again the nationwide ban on discriminatory practices. Section 3 is the bail-in provision where courts may order pre-clearance be obtained under Section 5. And Section 4B is a 2-part pre-clearance formula that was recently struck down in a landmark Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. So the court recognized key facts, including minority voter turnout exceeded non-minority turnout in 5 of the 6 states originally covered by pre-clearance under Section 5. The court did not strike down Section 5. What the Supreme Court did was it held the coverage formula in Section 4B was outdated because it relied on data from in a formula imposed in when the act was adopted. And so it ruled Section 4B unconstitutional. So what would the impact of the Shelby County holding be in Michigan? We had 2 townships that were covered, Buena Vista and Clyde townships. So the practical impact of that is now the state of Michigan, the school districts, or the counties that those townships are seat in would not have to go through pre-clearance for any voting changes. I would note too that those 2 townships are the only non-state and non-county areas that were covered by pre-clearance. So here we have the Voting Rights Act. All post-Shelby County decision did was take out that Section 4B criteria. So again, they did not strike down Section 5. Congress can adopt another formula, but the court noted in its opinion that it would have to be an extraordinary measure that addressed a direct extraordinary problem that currently exists. And I think I'll stop there, and we can go on to the other criteria, hopefully at a later date. The first criteria, again, is the goals set in the US Constitution and the Voting Rights Act that are mandatory. They are the preeminent criteria nationwide. The second criteria down are traditional redistricting principles that are used in standard methods for redistricting. So I look forward to sharing those with you in the future.
All right, thank you, Julianne. Any questions for her based on this presentation before we move on? Okay, Cynthia, I think you beat out Anthony by about a second.
Well, it doesn't have to be answered now, but perhaps next time when we have time. I don't know what pre-clearance means when you're in this case. So.
Pre-clearance, just and I'm happy to address it more fully, but pre-clearance was an application you made to a federal entity, the Department of Justice, to get your proposed voting changes approved. So it would be closing polling locations, moving polling locations, all of those kinds of things. So anything that would affect the election process in those designated areas that were subject to pre-clearance. In many cases have asked for bail-in under Section 3 to mandate Section 5 pre-clearance, and the courts have been reluctant to do that. So hopefully that helps, Cynthia. It was a formal process.
It made making changes to the voting scheme almost impossible for those that required pre-clearance from the Justice Department. Anthony.
Julianne, how long do you approximate it will take to get through the whole slideshow that you prepared?
I think about, I believe Sue-Ann allotted me 15 minutes, which I snuck an extra 5 because we were ahead of schedule, as I always do. So I would think another 20. As the criteria go down through 7, they become much less dense as far as the topic and the background. So really the first 2 or 3, I think, are the bulkiest, the heaviest. So I would estimate another 15 to 20 minutes, Anthony.
You know, I think that this information is some of the most important, not only for us, but also for the public. I don't know how long we have the Michigan Department of State staff with us today, but I know this meeting goes on until noon. And looking forward on the agenda, we have the California Commission from 11 to noon. But if it's at all feasible, I would like to motion to extend this meeting from adjourning at noon to adjourning at 12:30 or 12:45, so you can get through the rest of that presentation.
We'll have to have Sally have some input here. Sally?
Good morning, everybody. I would recommend, although Anthony, I completely hear you, I would recommend that that Julianne picks it up at the next commission meeting. It's difficult for us to extend meetings at the last minute, and your recent meetings have been going so on schedule that you know, I don't know that myself or other members of our team planned for this to go over. So if that's okay with the commission, that's what I would recommend.
And I would offer that I heard Rebecca say she's not feeling well, and I know that I'm hanging on by a thread too. I would appreciate if we were able to let. I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the meeting, but I would respectfully request that we try to end on time if possible, because of sickness.
Okay. That okay with you, Anthony?
Yeah, I withdraw that motion.
Okay.
And just very briefly, again, it's just an overview. It's there will be many more opportunities to receive the information and receive it in again, I'm giving an overview. There's extensive detail on each of these but I wanted to just give a broad stroke over it. So I appreciate the opportunity and I look forward to finishing in the future.
Okay, moving on. Edward, Julianne stole some of your time, so talk fast.
Well, that's what teams do. Just as an informational item, just want to share that we are going out for RFP for a bid with regards to market research and a multimedia education campaign, and we'll be presenting that information to you next week, just as an informational item. And then the names that I wanted referenced for the record from the University of Michigan Center for Local, State, and Urban Policy are Monica Anderson, Christian Colin, Caitlin Coyer, Natalie Fitzpatrick, Claire Knutson, Jordan Daniel Lippert, Ryan Scott Wook, and their advisors, Deborah Horner and Tom Ivacco. If you look at your screen, we can talk about these public hearings. And if you can nod your head to let me know if you can see them at this time. Is everybody able to see? Okay, great. Thank you, because it's a little different on my computer. And so I just want to make sure that you're able to see it. All right, the requirement. Let me, hold on. I don't think it's moving with me for whatever reason. So let me move this here. All right, are you able to see the requirement? Perfect. Before commissioners draft any plan, this is according to the Constitution, the Constitution, the commission shall hold at least 10, I repeat, 10 public hearings throughout the state of Michigan. The purpose of these public hearings are, the first round of public hearings is 1, inform the public about the redistricting process. 2, purpose and responsibilities of the commission. 3, solicit information from the public about potential plans. Right now, we're working on getting communication assets. As you know, next week, we're doing our photos and our videos. We're working on branding. Part of the statement of work deals with statewide marketing research. It deals with identifying key messages and developing a key communication plan. But then the other thing from last week, our Michigan Department of State told you that we were doing a public comment tool. We need all of these assets to ensure that our public hearings can function smoothly and order, also effectively and efficiently. Part of our outreach strategy is to reach out to local and county governments. As I've shared with you, we've met with the Michigan Township Association, the Michigan Association of Counties, and the Michigan Municipal League, and we have more than 50 responses of presentations that will take place in March to increase awareness of the work of the commission and how people can participate, but also the public hearings. In April, we want to work with statewide organizations and their affiliates. So yesterday, our executive director, Sue Hammersmith, worked with the Michigan Nonprofit Association. We want to work with the Michigan State University Extension Center. We're looking at working with United Ways and many other statewide organizations, including the League of Women Voters in Michigan, as well as the Farm Bureau Association. So we're trying to cast a wide net. And if there's any statewide organization or affiliate that wants to connect with us, please send notifications through our website so I can reach out to you. We want to cast as wide as a net possible in working with statewide organizations and their affiliates and doing outreach opportunities in April. And then in May, prior to our public hearings getting started, we want to go to different areas where our public hearings are located as informal meetings with maybe 1 or 2 people, and just drive people and build momentum for people to come to the public hearings. These community-based outreach might not be something that is unique statewide, but might be unique to that community. And we just want to make sure that we're reaching out to them and encouraging them to come to the public hearings and provide their input. So those are the strategies that we're working on while we're trying to get our communication plan established and moving in this order. Once again, this is all being done to increase public comment and increase engagement with the commission. Public hearing criteria, we have 2 things. The commission shall conduct its hearing in a manner that invites wide public participation in the state. We want to make sure that the facility can host the most amount of people that we can get to come. If we have COVID-19 guidelines, we want to make sure that we can do it. We're looking at our layout for each and every one of these public hearings as theater style, and theater style is just mainly seats, no tables, and whatever guidelines that are in place, national, state, or even in the county, we want to make sure that we follow that, but we include as a facility that can hold as many people as possible. The second thing is we're to use technology to provide contemporaneous public observation and meaningful public participation in the redistricting process during all meetings, but also our public hearings. So this is what we did. So based upon this information and looking across the state, we want to propose 15 locations for the first round of public hearings and 7 locations for the second round of public hearings. Once again, the minimum was 10. We want to offer 15. For the second round, the minimum was 5. We would like to offer 7. Here are the proposed locations and cities and the date. And this is based on when we can get the information back with regards to the public comment tool being fully operational, as well as having a communication plan and our messaging fully operational. We want to start the first week in May. The reason why Gaylord is highlighted, because we want to use that as the first and second area as relates to public hearing. So May 4, we would go to Treetop Resorts in Gaylord, Michigan. It's a central spot in northern Michigan where we can get people to come. Having said that, the day before, we would fan out to areas outside of Gaylord, Alpena to the east, and Traverse City to the west, and anything kind of in between to let people know about the public hearing that will be taking place in Gaylord, and driving people there, especially in rural areas, to know about the public hearing. Once again, part of the outreach strategy, starting with local governments in March, working with statewide organizations and their affiliates in that area, and then getting down to community-based organizations is what we want to do prior to the meeting. On May 6th, we would go to Marquette and be at Northern Michigan University. And then on the way between May 4 and May 6, we would fan out in the UP and to have, once again, connecting with grassroots organizations and driving them to the meeting, letting them know that we're there and how they can participate. On May 11th, we would look at Benton Harbor at Lake Michigan College for the site. Once again, the same strategy we're doing in Gaylord and Marquette. We would do the same thing in Benton Harbor, St. Joe County, Van Buren County, Cass counties, making sure we reach out to those rural areas and drive them to the meeting on May 11th. May 12th, we will look at the Lakeshore Convention Center in Muskegon. On same strategy, Grand Rapids would be another spot for the second. Looking at the DeVos Center on May 13th. Ann Arbor, we would be at looking at the University of Michigan on May 17th. Once again, same outreach strategy as before in all the other locations. May 18th, the Lansing Center, first and second public hearing would take place in Lansing. Then in Midland at the Great Hall Banquet and Convention Center on May 19th. And then in Flint, that would be another place for a first and second public hearing. It would be at the Dort Financial Center. And then the following week, we would start in Southfield at Southfield Pavilion in Southfield, May 25th, in Dearborn at the Ford Conference Center. Novi for a first and second public hearing at Suburban Collections Showplace. Then in Detroit, we would be at the TCF Center, also known as Coble Hall, for a first and second public hearing. At Warren, we would be at the MRCC Banquet Center for a first and second public hearing. And then for the last public hearing for the first round, we are looking at Port Huron at the Blue Water Convention Center. So this is my report. I can take any questions and comments, Mr. Chair, at this time.
Rhonda.
Okay, a couple of things. And I appreciate you putting in all the work, and I understand about the size to get as many people as possible. First, I don't think that within our budget, if we're talking about busing people, the rural people to these big places, when I'm looking at the layout, we have a big gap in the northern area where there's nothing. So to get to some of these places, it's going to be at least an hour or more drive. And I don't really see how it's feasible to, depending on how many people either want to go, if you're talking about busing people, to pay to have people bused. And secondly, I've discussed this before. My concern is, and I know a lot of these bigger theaters and stuff are found more in the cities, bigger populations, this and that. But I'm also concerned with the makeup. Actually, the political makeup of it, I feel like people are going to feel disenfranchised for their political views because I'm seeing most of these areas, voting areas, lean politically one way. And I'm not trying to bring politics into it. I'm trying to look at everything from the middle of the road and how other people might feel. So I think that we can do better. I mean, I understand with the COVID and we've got to separate and this and that, but I still have that in my mind where the rural areas might not bring in as many people, so we may not need as big of an arena. I know I made the suggestion before. I see you said about the university in Marquette. Ferris State has a university also that might be an option, and that's in a rural area that's close to 4 other counties. So I just want to make sure that when we do these meetings, it's proportionate to the whole state. And I understand about the sizes and everything of it. I'm just, me personally, I'm not thrilled with all of the locations and the locations that, I guess there's too much of a divide for what I would like to see. I would like it to be a little more inclusive, I guess. But that's my opinion, and I just wanted to put it out there. Thank you.
Well, I think everybody is attuned to getting a diverse set of places to be, and I think that we as a commission would be open. At least I certainly would be. I hope Edward would be. If you have, Rhonda, if you have some suggestions, you mentioned Ferris State. Other suggestions, let's get them out there. You know, I don't think Edward or Julianne or Sue Ann have a lock on what's a good idea. And I would say that for the rest of the commission. You got other areas you think would be appropriate? Let's take a look at them. And nothing cast in stone yet.
Yep. Just want to reiterate, these are just proposed, locations, and just, really trying to cast that net. But I think Ferris State would be a great location to identify that spot that is there. And so if we were to add that, would that suffice the concerns of the commission?
Well, I think that we need to take a look at others. I mean, we could look at Lake Superior State, we could look at Grand Valley, we can look at Western. I mean, there's all kinds of places that we can look at. So I don't know that that's the key is, well, I want this place or I want that place. I think the key is let's try to be as fair as possible and cast, as Edward, as you said, cast a wide net and see how we do that. I mean, clearly you go up into northern Michigan around Traverse City, it's going to be Republicans, no question. So some places going to be Democrats, i.e. Southeast Michigan. So, okay, Anthony, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I really like this plan, actually. I think it's ambitious. I think it's going to take a lot of work for us to do, of course, but that's what we signed up for. And I, for one, am totally, up for it. And I think it does, cast a pretty wide net. I mean, there are places in northern Michigan, there are places in, you know, the middle of Michigan, western Michigan, eastern Michigan, southeastern Michigan. And I think generally this list that Edward came up with is, you know, proportional to where the people are. I think keeping in mind where the people are is something that we also need to consider, because, you know, the more people that are in a certain area, you know, the more we will have to take that into consideration, because the first criteria of our Constitution is making sure that each district has the same size population. So I definitely agree that we can add places, or, you know, change the venues and stuff like that. But I think on a more broad and big picture look at it, I think this is exactly what we need to do. You know, it's definitely ambitious, but it's doable.
Okay. Rebecca.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think the focus isn't so much on what the particular alignment politically is. It's more, are we focusing on the population, and can the population get there? And I think sort of a target that I personally think is reasonable is, can we do all of these areas cover about an hour drive to get to it? Are we covering the whole state within about an hour drive? Which I think for the most part we are, except maybe that one area which would sort of hit like Traverse City, you know, Mount Pleasant, kind of Ferris State area, that I don't know if the two that we have, the Grand Rapids and Gaylord, if what the distance is for drive time between those versus Saginaw, if that's kind of covering that ballpark. So I'm sort of leaning towards maybe dropping one more site into that upper area of the lower mitten to see if maybe we can get closer to get people there. Because we don't want people to have to drive 5 hours to potentially come to a meeting if we can avoid it, because then we're just going to have declining participation.
All good points. Cynthia.
That's kind of what I was thinking, is to try to get the majority of the state within an hour or so drive. So I think that we should add something there to equal it out.
Okay, we're coming up to our time to talk to California. Edward, any finishing words?
How about we just move this to next week so we can kind of get it approved, and let's identify an additional spot if there's any other concerns. If they could just give them to me real quick so I can bring back the desire of the commission. But at this time, I'm just hearing something in that lower area that I heard from Commissioner Zatella, Commissioner Orton, and Commissioner Lang. And so if there's any other feedback or comment, just let me know so I can provide this back for the commission.
Just send an email to Edward if you have some concerns. I think we've said the same thing here is we want to be covering the state. We don't want to have people driving for hours at a time. And so we got to kind of work on where we're going to be. Rhonda.
Just real quick, all of the dates that you have up there, I know you had said something to me before about this. Are these all during the week, or are there any weekend dates on the list that you have right now?
Those are all during the week, Monday through Thursday.
Okay. Princeton budget memo. Who is going to do that? Sue?
I just wanted to provide it for your information.
Okay, it's provided. Upcoming meeting agenda topics. Is there something that we need to pay attention to specifically right now about that, or can we put that to the end if we need to?
We can put it at the end.
All right. I know several of us are, the cold has affected us. Do we need to take 5 minutes here? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll talk to California. Welcome, California. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
How's the meeting going?
Good. How's the weather in California?
Beautiful, as you can see.
Well, that could be background for the video.
Ye have little faith. I think it's going to be a sunny day today.
Well, you aren't here for my introduction. I'm in Florida.
Oh, you're cheating. I suffered through two Michigan winters, coming to see you guys.
And I lived there for about 15 years, so I understand it.
Well, I've lived in Michigan all my life, so I'm familiar with the process. We got everybody back. Rebecca's back. Anthony, we're waiting for Anthony.
So Steve, I think you were chairing last time. Are you guys not rotating?
Not rotate, correct. They made me do it for 6 months. Then we're going to take another look at it, I guess is what we're going to do.
Okay.
All right, everybody's back. Let's get back to full view. And once again, welcome to Cynthia, Vince, and who else?
Nina.
There you are. My pictures move randomly. So, Julianne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to inform the commissioners and our invited guests of and make the following statement. To say good morning again to the commissioners and welcome to our panelists. Before we begin the discussion, I would like to highlight that the MICRC is currently in the bid review process for both Voting Rights Act legal counsel, as well as the line drawing and redistricting technical services. Given that our bid process has not concluded, please do not identify any individual vendors or persons that you may have had direct experience with in your past work. I would ask that the presentation and any questions of our panel focus instead on the process. These comments focusing on process could include the way in which you interacted with the mappers, not who those mappers were or whether they did a good job. I know our commissioners have many questions about what it is like to work with mapping company and mappers in general. Thank you for your understanding and thank you again for the generous donation of your time. Sue?
Yes, and I just wanted to welcome our California friends. Cynthia Dye, thank you so much for setting this up and for moderating the panel. We appreciate you being here. Vince Baraba, who is also a former commissioner from the 2010 California Commission. And then with them today is Tamina Alan. She just disappeared for me.
It's at the bottom there.
Okay. So Tamina was part of the mapping team, however, is no longer with that company. But I know our commissioners wanted to know about process and how best to work with the mappers and how best to determine the most qualified mappers. So we thank you for being here, and Cynthia, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for having us back, commissioners. So I thought what we do is try to spend half our time in kind of moderated Q&A, kind of take you through some basics, and I'm sure you have tons of questions of your own that we hope to get to. I just wanted to remind you that the 2010 California Commission was under severe time and money constraints, and we did not have much of either. We were required to use the state contracting process, the RFP process, for any external vendors. And you've met Vince and me, but just briefly, Tamina was, of course, part of our intrepid team of mappers, all-female team. which I think was a industry first. She is also an attorney who happens to know a little bit about voting rights, which was pretty darn convenient. And she currently, in her day job, leads the policy and planning division for across the bay for Contra Costa County. So that's a little bit about Tamina. So I'm going to jump right in. And like I said, hopefully get to your specific questions as soon as we can. So the choice of a technical line drawing consultant was one of our first controversial decisions that we made as a commission. And it also was one of the important decisions that required a supermajority vote. And that meant that 3 of each partisan affiliation had to vote for it to pass. It ended up being a unanimous decision. But as you know, gerrymandering is a partisan blood sport, and most of the firms that were consultants in the mapping field were generally affiliated with one party or the other. And so it's gotten a little bit better now, but certainly back in 2010, that was the case. That was pretty much the only way lines were drawn. Were in smoky back rooms, with the exception of Arizona. So, so as you might expect, that was something that colored the decisions that we made. So, Vince, some of your fellow Republicans had some concerns about our decision, and wondering if you would share your take on what you remember about our decision. And remember to unmute yourself.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing was, as that discussion was going on among the different groups, it kept reminding me that since the commission had people from both political parties involved, I was much more concerned over which firm had the most experience with the data that we would have to use, and their knowledge about the complexities of the state of California. And I think that the quality of the firm became more important to me, and I think eventually to the rest of the group, which led to that unanimous decision, was that it was the quality of the firm, not whether they had a Republican or a Democratic background.
Sure. So just to give everyone some context, because we had no money, the amount that was set for the budget was below what most large national redistricting firms would be willing to do a state as big as California for. So we actually only had 2 bids. I hear your bidding process is going more robustly, which is good to hear. And one of the firms was actually disqualified for unresponsive bid. So that was kind of the start of things. So Tamina, do you want to kind of share, give us a little more color on what the controversy was about, and how your mapping team tried to address commissioner concerns?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners. Very nice to be with you this morning. There was controversy in the very beginning when we were going to be selected, and initially when we were selected, about the partisanship of the firm that I was working for, the group that I was working for. We are all declined to state voters. We are not politically affiliated with anybody. And apparently this was something that just was unheard of. And so we actually got a question. The lead consultant, we were at a meeting, and they said to her, so can you prove that you're not Democratic? And she looked at me and I looked at her like, I don't exactly know how to prove that I'm a negative, that I'm not something, but that was a type of questioning that we received. There was some concern that we were tied to some Democratic person and who was actually not a member of our team, who we knew from academic studies that we had done before and worked with, but was not a member of our team. But I guess because they were looking for somebody partisan, maybe who was a partisan man on the team who could be the ringleader. That's, I guess, who, you know, pressing questions were coming after. But I think for us, it's just about saying this is what our experience was. This is what these are the things that we've done in the past. We are social scientists, data scientists, so not really in the politics field. It was very new for me for this to be even a conversation because numbers are weren't very political in my mind. It was all about looking at the data and presenting the data. So I think the commission handled it. It was interesting from my seat that it was a conversation, but I understood immediately that, okay, we're in the world of politics now, and this is kind of part of it. So we went along and just answered questions the best we could in order to restore or, you know, put to bed any doubts that anybody had and really give confidence to the commissioners of our ability to do the work.
Thanks, Tamina. Yeah, and so just to be clear, certain commissioners insisted that that the firm cut ties with the only man who was affiliated with the firm who happened to be a Democrat, and that was what got some folks over the hump and ended up with a unanimous decision. So just a warning that even when people are not partisan, it's going to be seen through a partisan lens. So the commission realized early on that it could leverage our technical consultants' expertise for more than just operating GIS software. Vince, what were some of the other ways that the CRC utilized our team's knowledge?
Well, given the experience that the group that we selected had with the existing statewide database and their understanding of the VRA legal implementation, that was very helpful to us in addressing a very complex issue, which was how to deal with these complex issues. And their expertise in that area really helped us with the pre-clearance process, and also very helpful in determining locations for these public meetings, which this group just discussed earlier today, which I think we found to be the quality of those public meetings probably gave us more insight into what our assignment, how to complete our assignment successfully than probably anything else we ever did.
Yeah, and I'll add that, you know, there were specific things that were helpful. As I mentioned, Tamina is an attorney with VRA experience, and she wasn't the only one on the team. So their actual experience with VRA implementation was something that, in addition to our VRA council, helped us get fast pre-clearance, since California was a state subject to Section 5 pre-clearance. It's no longer relevant, as you hopefully have learned. Also, because of their familiarity with the state, we asked them to help us find the best locations for public testimony. And they did quite a bit of work in figuring out average driving distances for most Californians, so we could pick the best locations that were most accessible for the most number of Californians. They helped us kind of break up the state into some logical regions to literally break down the problem and help us divide and conquer a little bit. And also provided overviews every time we went to a new location to provide an overview of the region that we were in, because there are actually many different Californias. And kept track of all of the communities of interest, all the testimony that we got, which I ended up being in a couple thousands, I think. And another hard task was actually numbering all the districts, which maybe Tamina, you can shed some light on how difficult that task was, and also maybe comment on whether most mapping teams could or should assist with these kinds of tasks. We threw a lot at you.
Sure. Well, I think one thing that was useful is that our team was very familiar with the census data, and we're a census data shop, and we know a lot about the different tabulations and different tables that are available. And so we pretty much knew where to look and how to parse the data for anything that the commission wanted to look at. Another thing I think that we did that really worked well is we divided the state into several regions, and then we had mappers assigned to each of the regions. So we have specialized. So for example, I was in one of the regions I was in charge of was the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I knew the background of what was going on there. I knew some of the communities of interest. I had, traveled widely in the region. I actually live in the region. And so I knew what was going on there and what the different areas were. And so when the commission traveled to an area that I was in charge of, I'd be able to brief them on what is going on in the area, what some of the different pockets of population were. And then of course, as the community of interest testimony would come in, I had some idea of what they were talking about, because folks get very granular about talking about their neighborhoods and their areas, and they're not used to talking about it in terms of spatial, this is the street and boundary that cords off what my neighborhood is. They just happen to know that they love the place that they live and it's in this general area. And so being familiar with the area and being able to specialize on a particular part was really useful for me. So for example, I was not the main mapper in Los Angeles, so I knew much less about the Los Angeles mapping, because the person who was in charge there was really able to go in and do a lot of deep dive work of that particular region.
Great. And comment on whether you think mappers should always respond to these kinds of requests?
Well, so it depends. I think the mapper's job is to provide the commission with the best data that they possibly can in order to make a decision. The commission is going to be having to defend their maps. They're going to have to say where a line is, this is why this line is where it is. And so the line drawer's job is to say, here's the data, here are the options, excuse me, and here's all the information that you can use to make that decision. The line drawer's job is not to make that decision for the commission. Excuse me. It's 8 a.m. over here, sorry. And so really it's just the line drawer has to be careful to say, this is what I can do really to arm the commission with the best data that they can have, without saying, well, I think you should go this way, or I think you should go that way, because that is not a decision for the line drawers to make. The line drawers do not go in and say, well, we heard this this community of interest testimony, and so we have to draw the line this way, or we have to draw a line that way. That's just not something that's in the purview of the work of what the line drawers should do. That's what the commission is seated for.
Great, thanks. So you guys will remember that before we actually received the census data, and we're all waiting this year, but California always has to wait the longest. We're always the last one to get our census data because the state is so big. So before we received the census data, the CRC held a series of public hearings, just like you guys will be required to do. Vince, what do you remember the commission doing during this initial phase?
I remember traveling a lot. Well, we had 34 of these meetings, and the one example that really stands out in my memory was a meeting in Northern California, in what's sometimes called the Marysville area. And as we expected, there was a lot about the needs of farmers and cattle ranching in that area. And and we did not have enough time. But the thing that bothered us is that was our first meeting, and we didn't have a lot of time to publicize it. So we were concerned that some people might have been left out of the meeting. So we asked, are there any groups that should be here? And this one tall man got up and said, well, yeah, he says there's one of the groups that you need to talk to is the Sikh community. Well, I think that kind of stunned the commission because we were not even aware of how many Sikhs were in the state of California. But this gentleman pointed out that they brought rice farming to the area, and there was about 10,000 Sikhs living in the area, and that we saw them as really critical components of the community. As soon as he was finished, a woman got up and said, and don't forget the Hmong community, because they're farmers as well, and their farms really make major contributions to our area. Well, that's data that would never have shown up in any of the databases that were made available to us. And it's interesting that when we finally got through drawing that district, it was partially described as Assembly District 3, characterized by inland agricultural crops, such as rice and almonds, but it includes a large Sikh community as well as Hmong farmers in that area. And that, to me, was really the essence of the importance of these meetings, because it brought out something that was not available in the traditional data that is made available to the commission. And we got more of that in each of the meetings that we had.
Right. So definitely in the early phase, since we didn't actually have census data at that point, it was much more about understanding what communities we were dealing with in each area. And generally the tenor of the testimony was generally don't split us.
But let me just also add that having spent some time in Michigan, and when I was a census director, I was invited to a meeting, and it was of a group of Middle Eastern people in the area, and I couldn't believe how many people of Middle Eastern descent were at this meeting that I was attending. So that is a good example of an area that I would think is going to be really kind of important for the commission to address to. And I would only point out that one of my colleagues at General Motors, who's now teaching, who's now involved with the University of Michigan, is Talal Turfy, who I think lives in Northville. He is probably more knowledgeable about that community than anybody could possibly be. And he would be somebody you might want to consider in discussion and how to address the issues that reflect that community.
Great. And Tamina, as a mapper, what were the biggest challenges or concerns during this early phase?
During the early phase, the focus is really on getting those communities of interest groups together, getting that testimony and getting it mapped out on the maps. So what we would do is folks would come into the hearing and they'd say, here is where the boundaries of the Hmong community are. And then we would say, okay, is it this street and this street? And we would actually live map while we were there and click on the different census blocks. Does this look right? Is this the area? Because we really wanted to capture geographically and spatially what that area looked like. I think it's very important to know what the limitations of your data sets are. As Commissioner Baraba said, it's been very, you can say this is how many the census will count, for example, an Asian population, but it can't tell you a language minority group. And so, you can use ACS data, but really when you have to get down into those granular communities, it really takes the community coming out and saying, this is where these little pockets of community are that need to be kept together. And these are areas that may be identified as the census as we have something in common, but really we don't. So really getting all of that testimony together, it's challenging when you don't have the census data yet, because you can't, redistricting is a population game. And so being able to say, well, this is the number of people who live in this particular area is really important. And so not having that, it would be difficult for the commissioners who wanted to know, well, exactly how many people live in this area that the Hmong community wants to keep together. Can they fit in a district? We wouldn't be able to tell them that information quite yet. So that was the challenge. but really what we focused on was getting all of that community of interest data into the database and put together so that when we did have the population data that came in, we could overlay those boundaries and give them the information that they need for population.
Perfect. So like the ICRC, the CRC is composed of individuals selected to be different, in our case 14. Vince, tell us how the commission leveraged the knowledge of each commissioner to divide and conquer a very large state.
Well, I think we were very good at dividing it, but nobody ever conquers it. Well, we broke it down into 9 regions, and then we had a person of the commission who lived in that region and a person on the commission who was not a resident of that commission get together and take a close look at what should be considered within that area. In my case, the town I live in happens to be so right on the Monterey Bay. And so the more we looked into what was going on in our area and what we had in common, it became very clear that the 2 counties of Santa Cruz and Monterey, whenever a district was drawn, should be together because they surrounded Monterey Bay. And we were able to do that. So all of the state district and the congressional district created a district that completely surrounded Monterey Bay, which is of a keen interest to all the people who live there. And it was those kinds of discussions based on the knowledge of the individual who lived there, as well as the other person looking and questioning, that led to the kind of districting that we eventually drew.
Yep. And I was on the team, of course, that looked at the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it's Tamina. What was it like to handle direction from the 2-person regional teams?
The 2-person regional teams were great. I actually did work with both Commissioner Diane and Commissioner Barabbas on their separate regions. And it was really great to be able to do a deeper dive into those particular areas. For example, Commissioner Barabbas's region he was just talking about was subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. It was an area where you could not retrogress. And so while Commissioner Barabbas said, okay, well, this is the testimony that we've heard, these are the areas we want to keep together. It was, I was able to say, okay, well, here is the Section 5 area, here is what must be done in order not to retrogress. And so how would you like to combine the community of interest with this legal mandate that we have to bring together? But you could really get down onto the street level. You could really get down into the smaller communities, working with a smaller group instead of working for your 14 bosses at once. You only have 2, and really getting to know some of the really smaller areas where you're going to move those blocks. Because in the end, when it comes to that line, where the boundary of that district is going to be, that's what folks are concerned about. And so we need to really know what's going on at that block level and at that street level. So it's really great to be able to have the commissioners to be able to look in, think, ask questions at that level, and go back and think about them and come back and say, okay, Tamina, I thought about this. What would the map look like if we moved this area over here, or if we moved this area over here? And then I could move those areas around in live time for them, and they could take a look and see how that would inform their decision. So really being able to move quickly, live map, and do a lot more very specific, smaller line drawing was available because we had those smaller teams.
Yeah, and I also note that in addition to having kind of an experienced, person and someone with fresh eyes in each region, we also made sure there was one person that these were multi-partisan teams. So whoever was assigned to the region were not of the same parties. The ability to be nimble was also, I don't know what the rules are in Michigan, but for us in California, 3 commissioners makes a meeting, which would have required public notice and all that. So by making them 2 persons, that we were able to meet on the side and let Tamina crunch the numbers, and it just gave us a little more flexibility before she would come back in front of the full commission and present the results of all the crunching. And for Tamina, we made her redraw the Bay Area like at least 3 times to try to figure out how do we not cross the Golden Gate Bridge while not splitting a large community and another part of the bay. And it was very challenging. So we did that offline and were able to present to tell the full commission that we tried everything in order to meet those constraints. So the California Constitution provides 6 rank ordered line drawing criteria, highly similar to Michigan's Constitution, beginning with, of course, equal population, 1 person, 1 vote. How did the second criterion, which is adherence to the Voting Rights Act, affect the line drawing? Tamina?
Well, it's everything, really. You really have to start with the Voting Rights Act because for Section 5, for example, you're given these immovable puzzle pieces, which you have to start from. So the Section 5 said, okay, you have a population of minority of this particular percentage in this area, and you may not draw a new district which dilutes that population or makes it any less. So in other words, we have to start there because every single district that you draw is going to bump up against its neighbor and have a ripple effect on the ones moving forward. So you really have to start with number 1, your voting rights analysis. So you have to have your voting rights attorneys on board who can tell you about just, what's going on in that area. Has there been a racially polarized voting analysis that's been done on that area? What does that particularly look like? So that you're able to make your decisions about your legally required districts. So that's where you're going to start, and then you're going to build off of those. So you're going to build out from those particular districts and a district next to it and district next to it. If I were to start in the northern part of the state on the left-hand side and just start working down the state, then when I came to these immovable puzzle pieces, then there would be no way, I would be boxed in and there would be no way for me to meet those populations. So really you need to start with the things that you can't change and then move on to the things that you can change later on. The Section 2 districts are then next. So those would be the majority minority districts. Again, looking at the RPV analysis, can you draw districts which would fit within this particular section of the Voting Rights Act? What would they look like? What are the different options for those? Because if you can do those, then those would then be the second piece which you would then build and then build around.
Great. Vince, do you have any comments?
Yeah, the one, as a specific example, as I indicated, we were trying to keep Monterey and Santa Cruz County together, but there was a military base that was in Monterey County, which had been decommissioned. That base, at the time the count was made, had a significant amount of minority population. But when it came to the, that we had to match, but when it came to the new census, that population was not there. So Tamina had a real interesting job of trying to keep the counties together, but she had to reach further eastern to the east to pick up the more of the minority population so we can meet the Voting Rights Act. It became a real complex issue, for which she did a very nice job.
Yeah, and I will note that, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act has been struck down, so it doesn't apply. But you guys will still have to deal with Section 2. And we had a real challenge in Southern California, which is very dense. And when we looked at the census data, the different minority populations were color coded. And I always said, oh my gosh, this looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. So it was extremely challenging to draw Section 2 districts that would make everyone happy. We actually had to knock heads and make the various groups work it out with each other in some areas because we knew we were going to make some group really, really unhappy. And we had to also kind of thread the needle between the number of majority minority districts that certain groups wanted us to draw and what was legally possible. We ended up drawing a lot of what are called opportunity districts. So where citizen voting age population is not quite 50%, but pretty close. And also keeping in mind that the census traditionally undercounts underrepresented communities, might have even, actually been a majority minority district, even though we weren't seeing that in the census data. So it was a kind of this line between drawing enough districts, but not too many. And since we did not get sued by any of these groups, we considered it a major success at the end. Last question. At several points in the process, the commission had to literally go back to the drawing board, especially after our first draft maps were released and tomatoes started being thrown at our first attempt. Vince, how did the commission work with our technical consultants to handle conflicting testimony and map options as you remember it?
Well, we would look at the concerns that were expressed by these groups, and then we would identify changes that would have to occur in meeting that particular concern. That meant that taking an area already in an existing district and moving it to another district. The consultants at that time, our line drawing experts, would have to go into the database and make the changes and display them to us so that we could determine that if this requested change, which was meeting this requirement identified by an individual, had a negative effect on how we were meeting our other requirements. And so it was the dialogue that took place between their expertise in getting the data and showing us the alternatives that would have to be made to meet this requirement, and whether trying to meet that additional requirement had a negative effect on what our whole requirement set was. And that was an interesting discussion because as you can imagine, there were a lot of people who wanted to have certain things done, but the ability to see those consequences of what those changes would be quickly was very helpful in finally deciding which ones to go with.
Great. And Tamina, how did you manage conflicting directions from individual commissioners and the commission as a whole?
Well, first, I think it's important to point out that the line drawers really have to understand that it is the commission who are their bosses. Every break of every public hearing, there's a line of people just to be in our ears, tell us where they wanted things put, tell it, and of course we just say that's great for public testimony. You should go and fill out their speaker card and tell the commission this. But there are a lot of folks who have a lot of really strong feelings about where things are going to be. So it's very important to go back to the commission and, when they are wrestling with an area, to make sure that you clarify what the instruction is. So I would sit there and I'd say, okay, so Commissioner, just to be clear, your instruction is that you want me to move this block of 680 people out of area A, and you want me to move it into area B, and you would like to see what happens when this happens. I will take that back and I will move it and see where everything goes. When you're doing these types of moves, it's really like a wedding seating chart. So if Aunt Gertrude can't sit next to Aunt Mary, she's got to sit somewhere else. And so if Aunt Mary is going to be on table 3, then all of a sudden, Richard can't sit next to Eileen, and, everything moves around that way. And so it was our job to then come back and say, okay, so we moved this 680 person block out of area A into area B, and depending on where whoever gets displaced on the outside rim, because we added 680 people, we have to take out 680 people. Here are the possibilities for what can be moved in that area. Again, it wasn't our decision to make of which one to say. We said you can take 680 people out of this section of area B and move it to area C, or you can take 680 people out of this section of area B and move it to area D. And this is what it would look like and how it would affect the rest of your map that you've already drawn. And then it would be the commission's choice to say, in discussion, to say how they wanted to move forward with that.
Great. Okay, so I think we've given you hopefully a good flavor of the process. And I want to make sure to open it up and let you guys ask whatever burning question you have. Steve, do you want to moderate this part?
Sure. Doug, go right ahead.
That was very, very informative. I've got a number of questions. I think the first one needs to be directed toward Tamina. And what I'm looking at initially is what's the baseline that you establish when you begin to redistrict? So day one, when you start to redistrict and put maps together, what's the baseline? Based on your conversation, my understanding was it's the pieces you can't move, and you build out of that. My thoughts always were, gee, our number one priority is population. You divide the state up somehow into 13 districts for the congressional seats, and then you start moving the pieces around. So could you comment on that? And then I've got some comments on process as well.
Yeah, so actually, let me intercede. There was when we started the drawing, there was this kind of unspoken, thought that do we start from scratch or do we start from the existing districts? And although it was funny, we never actually voted on this. It just became really apparent to us as we looked at the map that we were going to have to start from scratch. And that was because, decades of gerrymandering made the existing map just crap, completely unreflective of the population. And so we kind of organically just started from scratch. But that was just something that that I know all the commissioners had in their mind. Go, Tamina.
Let me interject one comment here, though. We're going to reduce districts more than likely. So we really can't start from the existing districts.
Yeah, you're going to probably have to start from scratch also.
Correct. Okay. Tamina, could you talk about the baseline?
Absolutely, Commissioner Clark. So you are absolutely correct that the baseline is one person, one vote, and it is population. The problem is we had a very, very short timeline and we did not have the census data yet. So we didn't have that population. Normally, the way you start a redistricting is you say, okay, we have the census data, the most recent census data, 2020, and the census data 2020 says that we have X number of people in the population of Michigan. We are going to divide that by the number of districts that we want, and that is the ideal population for each district. And then that's what we have to shoot for. But we didn't have that data yet. And so we had to start doing some work. So we said, okay, let's take a look at some of the areas that we wouldn't be able to move anyway, and what they would do to affect the decisions that we're going to make down the road. And like was said, Section 5 is not going to be a problem for you. So you're not going to have those immovable puzzle pieces, but you're going to start to look at what are the communities of interest, what are the possible pockets of population that might form a Section 2 district, so that when you come to those areas, it might be a little bit easier for you to work with. And those Section 2 areas are definitely going to determine how some areas look, which are going to affect other areas. But you're absolutely right. Ideal population is the place to start.
Okay. But then how do you, when you get the census data, how do you overlay that into the equal pieces that you need to?
So what the software, we use Maptitude for redistricting, but there are many different softwares out there. Mm-hmm. And what the software allows you to do is gather different census blocks together into a geography, into an area, and then tell you how many people live in that area. Yes. So one of the things that is probably helpful for the commission to do, if you have not done already, is just take a look at the population density as it is now. Maybe I would use the ACS 2019 data instead of the last 2010 census data, since folks shift around so much. But for example, when you're looking in California, a lot of our population is in the South. Our northern counties are very sparsely populated. And so that's going to tell me already as a line drawer that my districts up in the North are going to be much, much larger looking than the ones in the South, because I have to reach into very many areas in order to find the population that I need. Mm-hmm. And most of the public who comes out is not going to understand that. They're going to say, how come they have such a big district and we have such a tiny district? Or how come these things look this way? Because the census blocks tend to look strange sometimes. And so I think it's very useful to get an idea of what the population looks like, what the moves have been over the past 10 years. And so you have an idea of kind of where things are going to shape out.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about process? I'm interested in the interface of the commissioners to the redistricting technicians. Okay. Now we've got 13 commissioners, and I understand you broke things into regions. I'm not sure we can do that because of our Open Meetings Act, because we'd have to have, I think we have to have open meetings for all this redistricting work. But how did your commissioners as a group say, okay, redistricting technician, I want to make this adjustment and take a look at what the results are? Do they, and this may not be your question to me, now it may be Cynthia's or Vince's, do they come together and say, yeah, let's make this change as a group? Or do they independently come back to people, to the technicians, and say, let's take a look at this and look at that and so forth?
The commission really focused on transparency. So they did all of their work, all of that type of direction as a full board. So it would be a discussion of the full board and saying, well, I think we should move this. No, I don't think we should move this. Who thinks we should move this? And that's why at the very end, I would say, okay, did we come to a final decision? And then the chair of the board would say, okay, yes, this is what we decided we'd like you to try. But it was definitely not something that we did offline. We didn't do any line drawing offline. It was all things that the public could view. And so everything was outdone in the public hearing space instead of, in those separate smaller groups. The separate smaller groups were more study groups to look at particular areas and what would happen if you moved certain things around. But when we actually did the line drawing and made the decisions of where those lines were going to go, all of that was done live.
That was done live, but you had these like subcommittees, these regions that independently brought back to the commission some recommendations.
Yeah, for example, we had this challenge in the San Francisco Bay Area where we got very strong public input not to cross the Golden Gate Bridge. And really the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge is very rural. It's quite different. But we had these very large communities of interest that we also were told not to split. And so these were two kind of competing constraints. So we would get direction from the full commission, go find out what our options are to not cross the Golden Gate Bridge, but not split these communities. And then I and Connie would go off with Tamina, and we would try to see what we could do and bring the options back to the full commission. I would also note that our commission chose to work by consensus, which, we define as, the will of the commission becomes apparent, and it's not necessary to take a vote because it's pretty obvious which ways that's going to go. So we tried as much as possible to speak with one voice to make it really clear to our mapping team what the commission wanted. But in general, if one commissioner wanted to see a particular option done, unless there was a huge objection, we would ask our mappers to do that. We knew we needed a supermajority vote at the end, and we wanted everyone to be satisfied that, we had explored all the options.
Okay. So I'm going to direct this toward Julianne, our attorney here. I look at the way they did their regional analysis, these two people groups, is similar to our subcommittees, which we always had to have as in the Open Meetings Act, Julianne. If we decided to take that approach, would we have to take these two people subcommittees for the regions in the Open Meetings Act for everything they do?
So that's an excellent question, and I'm happy to look at that and bring you back your answer.
Okay, that's no different than the subcommittees we work on now.
Yeah, so for California, three people is a meeting, so that's why we had 2-person teams.
Yeah, I don't think we have that criteria.
Well, we do have the quorum requirements in that, and so I say I would like to bring back the options and look at that, because really it's for the commission to decide how they're going to conduct their business. And I think that's the larger question that this commission would need to address.
Okay. Okay.
I would note that Michigan is substantially smaller than California, so it may not be as necessary to.
Well, and our Open Meetings Act, I know yours has a different name, but those are also very different as well. So your population in 2010 was 37 million, 37.25 or something, and we're the 10th largest state at just around 9 or over 9 million. So there's quite significant differences on a variety of levels. But I hear your question, Doug, and I'm happy to put together a writing for the commission to consider.
Yeah. Okay. One last question, Tamina. So you're recommending as a baseline, we start with the non-movable pieces, and then we build out from there. But at some point in time, I may have asked this before, but at some point in time, we've got to apply the census data. And so how do you, and we know we're going to probably reduce down to 13 districts or so. So how do we apply that initially? Even though we know one of the criteria is we've got to keep those non-movable pieces together.
I think I think she said there are, Section 5 is no longer applicable. So there are no non-movable pieces anymore. Okay. Am I incorrect in that, Tamina?
No, you're right. The part you're going to look at is Section 2 now. And those are majority minority districts. And council, please feel free to jump in on this. But so basically, you're looking at the population and you're actually using this census data. You are using the census data from as soon as you can get it, because that's going to tell you what the population is that you can move around. And that's going to tell you what the different breakdowns for the VRA for Section 2 would be for you to look at. So while you don't have immovable puzzle pieces anymore, you do have areas which could be subject to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which your council will point out to you. These are the areas, and those are the ones that you would probably start with, because you need to make sure that those are legally sufficient areas before you move on to other ones which have more options.
Yeah, okay. So concentrated areas of minority population, which of course is all of Detroit. So
okay.
Let me just add that as a person somewhat familiar with the census, this particular census is going to be very difficult to deal with because of all the problems they ran into in the actual collection of the data and all the things that were going on while they were trying to do their job. So I think these meetings where you go out and listen will probably be much more important to you in getting at least a beginning of a sense of what the districts might look like, so that when the data does finally show up, and it'll be much more limited in its characteristics, that you'll at least be able to meet the equal count in each of those districts. But I think you're going to have to rely more on listening to people from the areas as to how you might want to put them together.
Yeah, Vince has a really good point. I was an enumerator this summer, and I will tell you that in the rush of the census to try to complete to meet the former president's deadline, there were whole areas where we did not collect characteristics of people. So you will just not, you will only have population count. You will not know the characteristics of those folks. So Vince is totally right. So you're going to have to rely on public testimony to literally give color to some of that testimony.
Okay.
Not wanting to cut us short, and I'm not going to, but we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. MC.
In particular, was there a time when you, as the 14 commissioners of California, as you were doing these, I believe 34, public gathering this testimony, did you go out as a full 14? Did you ever find that you got feedback, or like, if you didn't go out as 14, did you get feedback that they were like, where the rest of the commission?
We always did. That was a decision we made as a commission, because like yours, our commission was designed to be diverse and represent that look like California. And we felt it was really important to go out in public and look like California wherever we went. I don't know what the 2020 CRC is going to do. And especially since everything's virtual, you kind of have lots of choices and how you want to do that. But that was a decision we made.
And the line drawer is accompanied at every hearing.
And it sounds like you got positive feedback. Like in general, there was a positive, like the idea that the full commission was represented at each one of those with the line drawers was well received. Is that also accurate?
People liked looking at us. They liked seeing faces that represented them.
Aaron, did I see your hand up? Okay, Anthony.
Well, I think that was a great presentation, and I also think those were great questions, Doug and MC. I was going to ask some that you already asked, Doug, but I just have one more for Vince. I'm wondering, how did y'all deal with combining smaller communities of interest together, communities that might be vocal in that they are a community of interest, but may not be large enough to, say, have their own district? You mentioned the monk farmers a couple times, and I'm just wondering, like, where did you combine them so that they were satisfied?
Well, that was really one of the more difficult activities, as you've identified. But what you ended up doing is you had to step back and look at the big picture. And in the case of that example with the Hmong farmers, we figured that since that whole area related to farming, that it was a good idea to bring them in, even though they were in the northern part of the district and the Sikhs were in the southern part of the districts. The fact that it wasn't just that they were a group of Hmong, but they were also farmers. So it was the combination of characteristics that allowed us to bring it together.
And thank you. That answers my question. Thanks a lot for that. And you also said that the main thing you got from the communities of interest were essentially, keep them together and not to, put a line between them.
But also who they wanted to be with. What surrounding communities did they have a natural affinity for, that they shared common interests, that having the same representative would allow them to have more effective representation?
And I recall one meeting in Long Beach. We were, because Long Beach is a very complicated community, and it had many different interest groups. But the group that we talked to in a large meeting in City Hall said, keep our different groups together because we find interest in going to the different activities on the weekends that each of these groups do. And that makes it, living in Long Beach, an interesting place to live. So that was another example of, it was a community of interest of saying, our community of interest is the differences, because we enjoy being part of that community that has the differences. So it's very important to be very attentive that when people are telling you things, because in that case, we actually made the distinction in Long Beach to keep the entire city together, even though it had a wide range of different communities of interest.
I want to take, MC, I want to take yours, and then if we have more questions, I think we can email some or figure out another way to ask California to enlighten us further, and maybe even get them back here again since they enjoy our cold weather. MC.
Especially virtually.
So I think the question is in relationship to the sort of the, let's say, the well-resourced communities of interest and the ones that aren't as well-resourced. And was it apparent to you, like, that there were some that were, that say were louder or that were easier to hear from? And was there something that you did in order to help create a balance, sort of like trying to figure out which ones, were sort of,
Yeah, it's really important not to just listen to the loudest voices in the room. You are going to naturally hear from the groups that are well financed and have resources and, did statewide maps on their own and presented them to us. I mean, it's important to listen to those groups because there's a reason they're well financed, because they're generally larger groups. However, like we never actually heard directly from a Hmong farmer. I mean, other people stood up and spoke for them, which was, fabulous. And we heard from some very small groups where only one person came, but, we use, and maybe Tamina can comment on this, but, whatever data we could to try to back that up and try to map that out. Do you want to comment, Tamina, on some of the really small groups like Somali refugees and the Armenians and in LA?
Sure. Just that it's not a popularity contest. And so communities of interest are not weighted more heavily than others. So we would have groups that came out all wearing like the same pre-made red t-shirt that had like their slogan on it, and they'd line the walls of the hearing room and say with their, and they all, 20 of them gave the exact same testimony about where the community of interest is. And I would map that community. And then we would have one person come out from, a poorer section of San Francisco, for example, and say, I live in the Western Addition. This is what my community is. And there are a bunch of us, we're all at work right now, but this is what the community is. And we map the community in the exact same way. So the community testimony would be respected either way, regardless of how many folks actually came out. Of course, the commissioners would see the number of people who were there, but what it looked like when it came down to the maps was these are the different communities that were testified about.
And I would just add that as far as the expenditure of funds, the one place where you really want to put most of your expenditures is in these meetings, because you'll hear things there that you would not hear anyplace else.
Yeah. So anything you can do to make it easier for, underrepresented communities to have a say. You got to remember, a lot of them are not politically sophisticated, and going to a public test, doing public testimony is something they've never done in their lives. How can you make it easier? So, we did things like, making sure materials are available in multiple languages. In key meetings where we knew about the region we were going to, we had interpreters on hand. We work with community organizations that were well respected, who we knew could represent their communities and organize them. I know that Voters Not Politicians is working to try to organize some of these smaller communities of interest, and our commission was happy to subgrant some of the money we had left from the grant that allowed us to travel to other states to help support that. So we actually gave the Count Michigan Votes organization some money to help support these smaller communities to train them how to give public testimony, how to map their communities, and anything you can do as the ICRC to help facilitate that, to make sure you get the data you need to make informed decisions, I think is really important.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to thank Cynthia and Tamina and Vince for coming and sharing with us. It's clear to me that some of the things we're doing we're on the right track, and we haven't thought of everything that we ought to be doing, and that's to be expected. I think I can say if we could send you three or one or whatever some emails with questions, you might consent to answer them for us, and maybe we can prevail on you to come back at a later date once we figure out how much we don't know, and then see what we can do. But we really, really appreciate you coming in. It's been very interesting, and you have been very enlightening. And with that, we are kind of at the end of our time, since we had already asked our people at control these meetings if we could run over, and we have already done that. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn from somebody. Anthony is motion, Rhonda second, all in favor.
Just a quick comment, like more of an announcement before we end. I just want to say that yesterday, oh, sorry. Can y'all hear me still?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yesterday, there was a live stream of the Michigan Nonprofit Association, and Sue was on there for a moment, and I thought she did a very good job. The two major questions they had that I listened to were when and where we're going to have these meetings, and then also they asked about what we're going to do with the census delay. So I think we should continue to talk about those things and hopefully answer some of those questions at the next meeting.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. We'll see everybody next week. Thank you again, California.
Stay
Thank you for
warm.
having us.
It was our pleasure.
Bye.